The second presenter is Raimo Vuorinen from Finland, and he's a project manager of educational studies, and he has also worked as a coordinator of European public educational networks, and he's going to talk about how to make decisions about career policies. Well, this will be a web presentation.
So, dear colleagues, and thank you for the invitation for this event, but I apologize, I'm not in Tallinn at the moment because last week there was snow on ice on the street and I was not careful enough, and then I got injured on my left knee, and yesterday I went to the doctor and he advised that in order to get the knee in proper condition, it's not recommended to travel at the moment. So, but thanks to Estonian technology and knowledge in information and communication technology, we can spend the 45 minutes using this online environment. The topic of the discussion, I've made a sort of title, Recent Trends in Lifelong Guidance Practice and Policy Development. And Anthony Mann, so thank Anthony for the good presentation. So I will be repeating some of the themes. You provided already the details and context, and I will follow up on some of the themes. And the last item, what you said was that when developing guidance services, we can continue what has been done, but do it more in the future. So what I will be highlighting is not necessarily new to Estonia, but perhaps strengthening some of the things what you have been developing already during the last 20 years. Because this conference as such is an example of the work which Estonia has been doing. Estonia is among those countries which have made a lot of progress developing guidance systems and policies within European Union context, but also being actively contributing to the European Union lifelong guidance practice and policy development. And when you are streaming this conference, I repeat, as such, it's an example of this active contribution. So I will highlight some of the trends based on the recent work, what we have been doing within the European Union, but also globally, and then highlighting some of the, let's say, how to transform and reposition guidance from the perspective of technology, and then highlighting some of the recommendations and proposals that have been developed based on the recent cooperation on global level. So if you put the next slide, please. So as Anthony Mann mentioned, there's guidance is more important than ever. And there are also indicators of the interest of the policymakers and the importance. But the policymakers are not interested, not only guidance, but there are some wider policy goals which are important or which are acknowledged as priorities on a country level. For example, decreasing the skills mismatch as part of the future work. So guidance is a tool or a solution how to achieve these goals. And that's why there are a number of references, both in the OECD and EU policy documents, which are focused on early school leaving, adult learning, continuous learning, upskilling, development of vocational training, and youth unemployment, how to prevent youth unemployment, but also how to promote entrepreneurship. Next, please. I browsed these first slides previously because Anthony already provided some of the details on this. But I highlight that one of the latest documents on EU level was the European Pillar of Social Rights. There are direct quotes that we should promote access to career development support or career guidance services as an individual right, which provide equal opportunities to learn and work. And some countries have already done this either through legislation or developing national strategies. Other European documents which relate to upskilling, promoting the upskilling of adults or those who have not sufficient qualifications for future labor market, but also there are references on validation of prior learning and how guidance should be connected to that. And then the youth guarantee is another example which has been a measure to allocate resources for guidance. And there are two explicit documents on lifelong guidance, which are Council Resolutions 2004 and 2008, which invite countries to integrate career guidance to lifelong learning strategies. But those are now 12 years old, and there seems to be a demand or interest from the countries that the Commission should or the European Union should update some of these documents. Next, please. Since 2006, the European Union member states have been organizing presidency conference on lifelong guidance, and the latest ones are 2016 in the Netherlands, and then Tallinn was hosting the European Guidance Week roughly 2.5 years ago, and some of the recommendations were taken on board on the presidency conclusions. So that's an example of that. This bottom-up approach can be done to identify to some of the priorities which could be developed in the future or integrated in the policies. And 2.5 months ago, during the Finnish presidency, career guidance was discussed during the European Skills Week or the European Vocational Skills Week in Helsinki, and there was a specific guidance event validation, and I will highlight some of the conclusions in the forthcoming slides. And the next, please. The guidance is, there's an interest both from the policymakers, but also from the individual perspective. And Anthony highlighted also the need why we should invest in guidance. These are due to the changes of the labor market and the fluidity, and this has increased the interest from the individual perspective. What are my future aspirations? So the individual needs relate to career information. What do I have to know about the future? What competencies and skills are needed in the future? And the first question which the moderator was asking, what is the career? Is it sort of path or ladder? But we can say a career is an individual life path in learning and work, and in other settings where we need to predict or think and reflect about our future. So from individual perspective, we cannot predict exactly what are needed, but we can be prepared for the future. And also we need to build new skills, either in formal learning or non-formal learning or informal learning, but also how to obtain these skills through validation. And there are more and more transition. So a career is a sort of sequence of transitions in learning, from learning to work, back to learning and validation. And that's why we have to rethink how guidance fits into the picture. The next, please. And there is evidence that these type of skills are needed also or sought after by the employers. For example, CDFOP has launched a website, Skills Await, where an individual can find information about the future demand of skills within countries or within European level. And the analysis a couple of months ago highlighted that the skill which was most sought after by the employers was the workers' adaptability to change. And this change is a challenge both for the individuals but organizations, and it requires sort of constant monitoring and constant reflection. What is happening? What are my own values? But then, what are the future options? And next, please. This implies that we can identify a new competence as such. We have professional competencies which we need for perform the tasks in labor market, either employed, self-employed, or in these new forms of contractual arrangements in platform economy, gig work. But this is a skill which was included within the key competencies for lifelong learning last year. And we call it in English, we call it career management skills. We have defined that it's a set of competencies that enable citizens at any age or any stage of development to manage their learning and work-life paths. And this, in practice, this means that I'm aware of my own skills and interests and aspirations, but also the opportunities in the labor market. So this is the content. What do I have to know in order to make well-informed and carefully thought decisions and plans? So it's also the process, how I use this information and act based on the information that is available. And the individuals have different readiness for this, but this is a competence which can be learned. And this is one reason why we have to rethink, or one rationale of rethinking guidance. Next, please. This implies that if this is one competence which can be learned, and it emphasizes the individual process and also the individual skills. So the goals of our activities is not only to help to make the choices or helping individuals to solve their problems, but it's also helping the individuals to learn the skill which they can use in different settings. But we cannot put the responsibility only for the individual, because countries have different labor market conditions, different levels of economy. So I could have skills, but if there's not work available or jobs available, these skills don't help to create the work, but they help me to use the opportunities and cope with the situation, how to be resilient if my goals are not, or actions and wishes are not, they don't come true immediately, but how I can maintain my self-confidence and dignity in this type of situation. So this means that the shift from career guidance or career services have shifted from the input-oriented perspective, how we provide the services or how we help the individual, rather to an outcome-oriented view, that how we are helping the individuals to acquire these skills. And this means that the shift is from helping profession to enabling profession. And this is a balance, and a new type of balance for guidance services. I'm not excluding the helping profession but I'm not looking at problems to start with. So we are looking what is the horizon, what opportunities there are, but also what type of barriers there might be. So having this preventive and in compensative approach together, I think this is a challenge for the practitioners. And that's why in the next slide, I'm highlighting this change with these pictures. I've been working in the field of guidance over 30 years and had my training or competencies for career work in the 80s. And at that time, we went among the students and we were looking for needs for guidance. Who needs guidance? What is their problem? So guidance was looking at problems, helping the individuals. So the outcome was individual, but it was like the one boy on the top of the picture that the problem has already occurred, and then we are trying to solve the problem and prevent that the problem doesn't get bigger. It helped the individual. It was practical, like the patch on the trousers. It's pragmatic. It keeps the function, but strategically we were too late, and that's why it was not the most effective way of doing it. Like Anthony said, that the individual, if we have career aspirations, or we can integrate career guidance within education system or promoting skills for transition, then guidance becomes like a lubricant in the system. It helps the machine to work. It's preventing damages and making systems smooth. So the future role is having, again, I'm highlighting that, not excluding the remedial approach, but by focusing on that, we are strategic led, and we are keeping the guidance marginalized from the mainstream services. So I think this is one of the learnings, that having this new type of balance, what is needed. And then we come to the role of technology. A couple of slides of that. So the next, please. What we heard in the previous slide was that the world of work is changing. We have ICT, automation, robots, artificial intelligence, and we are using technology in more and more services. In Estonia, you are globally unique that you have much more services available online than any other countries. So people are used to use technology in the daily activities or accessing daily services. And I'm asking that, should we rethink guidance accordingly? Guidance is also a career services, it's a job, it's a profession, it's a service. Should we have this rethink the use of technology in similar way that how the change is taking in other forms of work or other branches or other settings? We used to have, when we started to discuss the use of technology in guidance, we have used to think that is this individual dialogue in a safe environment, safe room, together with the individual citizens and the practitioner, and that's the real guidance. I'm using the brackets, real guidance. And then the other forms is, we were saying that, and we have ICT and guidance, which is just separate. And these are two different worlds. We cannot do the same thing. But we have been examining guidance, or instead of saying that it's not the same, we have been examining what guidance functions can be conducted or delivered or implemented with the help of technology. And then we can sort of look how these ICT and traditional way of guidance can merge together. There are some specific questions, but instead of comparing, we are looking what we can do. So rethinking guidance, and the next slide will highlight how guidance can be used within the individual process. And now I'm focusing first on the individual guidance process from the user perspective. I'm quoting the research from my colleague Jaana Kettunen, who has been in Estonia as well. And we have been interviewing practitioners, how they integrate ICT in their work, and what is the evidence from the literature. And the easiest way of using guidance is to move the traditional paper-based material into internet or technical settings. So we are using information communication technology in sort of delivering the information. That's one way communication from supplier perspective, service provider perspective. Then with the evolution of technology, like we are having now, we are using technology as a channel for communication. So we can use ICT in delivering career resources, exercises, but also this dialogue, or we can use chat or emails, but it's one-to-one communication, again, from the service provider perspective. The third option is that we can use ICT in collaborative career exploration. So using online working environments, like you are now posting questions, but there can be integrated dialogue or tasks or joint assignments or group work, group discussions, and we organize the platform for clients. But that's, again, we provide the services. But the biggest change what the latest technology has provided, that individuals can also create knowledge, create information, publish information much easier than before. And the individuals have the same access to same information as we have as career practitioners. So we don't have the monopoly anymore for the information, but also we cannot control what is taking place. So the individuals are using these platforms with or without the help of practitioners. So we have a number of environments where people are talking about their careers, work together among themselves. And now, as practitioners, we can have a new type of presence in these environments if we are invited and if we are getting access. But we cannot control this. So we call this co-careering, co-constructing meaningful knowledge together with community members. And people are using this, and it takes place. And in order to sort of discuss or challenge our work, we can ask, is this guidance? How can we help the individuals to develop the skills, how they perform there, but also how, as practitioners, we have presence in these environments? So this is one change. The next slide illustrates the thinking or the way how we can solve the problem. So instead of distinguishing what is ICT and guidance and what is ICT, not, let's say, guidance without ICT, we are saying what are the guidance functions we need to take into account. So we have one-to-one dialogue, breathing the same air or on distance. We have the group work in same room or distance. We can have access to information in a career center, but also through distance or self-help, and we can have this collaborative career exploration. So in a way, instead of distinguishing not ICT or with ICT, we are just rethinking what should be the outcome. And then now the strategic perspective, the next slide. We have been discussing what is the role of ICT. how is it in the guidance process, but we can say it's a tool to assist the guidance, it's an alternative, it's changing the work, and it's an administrative tool to support the service delivery, but also collecting the evidence. And that's why finally we say that we are managing and modeling the services with the help of ICT. It's an integrative agents to model the services. And the next slide, please. We have found some challenges, what prevents how to reach this. And we found 4 themes which countries have been facing when changing the services with the help of ICT. First, it has been inadequate access to technology because of the coverage or the cost of the services. But in Estonia, you have a very wide system. Second, it has been the inadequate access to information. And this can be a challenge if the education information is separate and if the labor market information is separate. So if they are collected and published with different logic, it's from the individuals, it's hard to use. And the third one is inadequate skills and competencies of the individuals to use the services, but also the practitioners to support the individuals. But in Estonia, when you had the Tigerihüpp or the national strategy, you were helping and teaching the individuals for all ages throughout the country to use the services. And the challenge is now how you are training the practitioners in the same manner to use them in a sort of integrative way. And finally, the biggest challenge in most of the countries is the inadequate integration of technology or guidance into other e-services. And this is we have the technology, we can have the technology, but if we have not been repositioning guidance in such way that different sectors understand the overall function and overall added value of guidance, we cannot take the full use of full potential of the technology. And the next 15 minutes, I'm highlighting some of the findings, which are the questions that countries could discuss when developing the services, but using the technology to support the design and rethinking of the guidance. And the next slides, please. Within European level, the European Commission commissioned a study last year about lifelong guidance policy and practices in the EU. What are the trends, challenges and opportunities? And this study was together with Warwick Institute for Employment and Research and our institute. And we submitted the report to the Commission just before Christmas. So I cannot say all the details at the moment or the final results at the moment, but I'm highlighting some of the findings which were introduced already during the Finnish meeting 2 months ago. So the next slides, please. The major question in this study was that how should career guidance evolve to support the transitions between learning and work and to support lifelong learning? And the second, what areas of guidance policy and delivery would benefit for more structured cooperation on the European Union level? And we had some preliminary findings. Next, please. First, we were mapping what are the actors who provide guidance services. And we found out that we need to think the career services, like in many countries, from education perspective, but also from the labor market perspective. So the individuals, but also the wider benefits, which Anthony was highlighting. And we found out that countries differ in the guidance provision based on what type is the education, in compulsory, post-compulsory, or third age guidance. and also whether it's in comprehensive education, vocational education, higher education or tertiary education, or whether it's linked in work-based learning and validation. Secondly, there were variations whether the guidance was within the formal economy or informal economy, voluntary economy, or domestic economy. And then based on this, on a national level, there were a number of different providers. And I think in Estonia, you can recognize that you have Töötukassa, like employment services, local centers, private services, third sector, youth services, trade unions, but also some data providers who are connected to this service delivery. So these are national representative structures. Some of them are directly connected to the services, but some are indirectly. And then in EU level, we have these policy influencers, data providers, policymakers, professional associations, but also research institutions which provide information. So we have a number of providers, a lot of data. But the challenge seems to be the coordination between these. Next slide, please. So we found out that countries have been putting attention to develop coordination mechanisms, like in Estonia. You have had Innove, you have Töötukassa is doing work, and then you have a national forum, and you have now re-established the national forums. So you have been able to have the dialogue, but if in some countries there are many different interests, and these government sectors who have separate funding, they seem to think from their own perspective, not from the outcome perspective. So the countries which have made progress have been either making a national strategy or integrating or embedding guidance to frameworks for education, or then national employment strategies, and then based on this looking for cooperation on service provider level. And then the role of employers, like Anthony mentioned, that has become more crucial because they provide the information about the skills demand, but also provide learning opportunities for the individuals where they can obtain this labor market information. Second, many countries are trying to get this coordination through legislation. And there are two different ways how they have been doing it. The legislation might not be guidance specific, but they describe the citizen entitlement for services within education programs or within employment. Iceland is an example where the access to guidance is an individual right, which is sort of mentioned throughout from a lifelong learning perspective. And France is another example, and Germany as well, which have been moving to this direction. Some countries have legislation of the service provider, but then this might lead to a situation that the outcome is not direct. It's also how to main these organizations, not thinking of the joint effort, and might not be cost effective. Next slide. What we found out that in order to get the full benefit of these existing expertise which is within the services, it's to look at the outcome. And in order to get this full potential, we have learned that none of these sectors can do this alone, because it's so sort of complicated concept. We need information about ourselves or the other service providers, but also we need to agree what should be the outcome. So from coordination perspective, not only to have information on each other, we need to first discuss what should be the area for cooperation. We could work together, we can agree on, and then we can sort of use our resources together without competing who is doing the right way, who is doing the right services. And then having the user perspective in designing the concept, what are needed in the future, and then how we integrate the labor market information in such way that it is used by the employers, guidance service providers, and also the individuals in the same system. So having this open source approach where we can sort of access the same information and not maintaining parallel different systems. So we need to think lifelong and life-wide the individual needs, and then thinking of these different transitions within education and labor market, as I mentioned. And then there are some recommendations which I'm highlighting in the last slide. So if you have the next two slides, ways forward, and then some information from global level. I mentioned the European Union level policy conferences, but there's also international work cooperation on this issue. And last June, there was a meeting in Tromsø in Norway, where Estonia was participating, where countries are working, discussing these similar challenges which they are facing, and then looking for solutions, how we could strategically think forward. And these countries, they are based on, let's say, mutual learning and give sort of catalysts for national thinking. And I'm highlighting the conclusions of the previous communique, and now you can reflect how Estonia is sort of positioned in the light of these recommendations, and then how you could make these more concrete, how you could operationalize them in the next few years. So if you take the next slide, there were 4 themes within the communique: leading career development services into an uncertain future, ensuring access, integration, and innovations. These were the 3 topics which relate to the topic of this conference, jump to the unknown. Next, please. The first one was that if the government sectors can agree on a cross-sectoral strategy for career services and embed it into the wider skill strategies, education strategies, employment and social policies. And I'm not aware that Estonia is already, you had a strategy, you are revising it, and you are making it more concrete. So this is on the way in Estonia. Second, strengthen quantitative and qualitative evidence on career development to support decisions about policy and practice. And this was what Anthony was mentioning as well. On a European level, CareersNet, which is a CEDEFOP, CEDEFOP maintains this network. They are also currently conducting a study that whether we could have a common level of indicators and sort of to get this evidence in much more structured way for countries and mutual learning. So the third one was to create mechanisms for sharing and learning from international policies and practices. So using information, but also mutual learning opportunities or other forms of sharing good policies. And then ensure that career development programs and services develop citizens' ability to manage their own careers. And this is what Estonia is also doing. You have been developing the framework for career management skills. It's part of the European work, and the Finnish presidency event also proposed that whether we should have a European framework of CMS, and a number of European Union funded projects have been developing on this or collecting examples of different countries, and the outcomes of these will be available in the spring, and also it'll be part of the Europass, hopefully, I think. The next one. It was about improving access. So it's providing services, but it's also informing the individuals what are available. How can I benefit from the services? What is the added value of these services? Is this the right service for me? So in a way, marketing the services in such a way that it's ethical, it's important. Second, recognize the diversity of the users and ensure that the provision meets the different interests, different cultures, but also the different age group, different readiness, and also different readiness of the use. So we are not overserving or underserving, but we are targeting the services in a proper manner. Next, please. Then it's important to integrate career development into society. It's important that we even enhance or establish mechanisms to support coordination and cooperation between government agencies and departments. And this is what I mentioned, Estonia, you have been revisiting and reorganizing this. Empower citizens to shape the programs as well. Estonia, you are collecting feedback of the services, and you are getting the surveys among the users and using this information already to improve the services. And then develop a resource, a national body to support consultation and coordination in career development. And you have been doing this already in Estonia. Norway, Ireland are examples of where there are national coordination units which support the local development in accordance to the local condition. And finally, the fourth slide is to, next please, supporting the innovation. We need to, guidance is, we know that if it's publicly funded, there are some resources, provides equal opportunities, it's the service, but we need funding also to support the innovation and space for piloting new services which are customized and sort of jointly agreed. And this can be done with an integrated and transformative multi-channel approach which takes the use of the potential of the technology in delivering the services, modeling the services, bringing sectors together, but also getting the evidence of the impact and sort of the outcomes of the services. And then finally, the professionalization and professionalism of the service providers is one of the 5 national meta criteria in Europe, that how we are supporting the services through professionals which are capable of delivering the services, but also informing the citizens that they can trust on the quality and ethics of the services. So in Estonia, this is one challenge, that if you are developing national programs or diplomas, then this is you need to take into account that the professionals can sort of meet the demand both in education, employment, and also third sector. So thinking this life-wide and lifelong perspective. But most important, it's also that the professionals need to have the language to articulate why there's added value for the individuals, but how the Estonian society can benefit from the guided services. And the next slide, it's the last slide, will illustrate the transform. In Finnish language, it's in a poetic, we can say siiloista silloiksi. Siilo is a silotornit, and then we can say in Estonia, silotornit siltatex. So ehitakem silotornist sillat. So instead of providing looking at the guidance inside of sectors, use guidance as a bridge which sort of brings together the different service providers. As I mentioned, this is a work that none of the sectors can do alone. We can benefit from local cooperation or professional cooperation, local, regional, national, but also European level cooperation. And I think this seminar is an example where we are bringing the practitioners together. So I'm completing here and leave time for questions, and thank you. Tänään.
And now, so let's see the first presentation. And we have an excellent technical support here, so we will not miss or drop any of the questions. Why these career design questions are and competences are needed at the moment. So there are several answers that the world is changing very quickly. The volume of information is tripled every minute or second. And so we are learning on different levels here. The labor market is in rapid change. And also it was important that the role of parents is on both levels at the moment, so that to involve and include their parents, so that they could be able to support their children and also to learn new ideas and several new ideas as well. The children should be able to protect and to provide for their parents and grandparents in the future. So the demographic issues here and also self-management issues were also there, so that children could be able to make critical decisions about any risky areas and something more. And from the first presentation, it was clear that the choices could be very narrow, because we do not know in the teenage phase how wide is the world. So definitely you could review these feedback comments. So they are already on the web page uploaded, and later you will receive a simplified address in order to have access, so you will have it at hand. And now the questions. So I ask in Estonian, and I read in Estonian, and the translation will be provided by the interpreters. So what has been kind of shaky, or what is the conditions in the work labor market? So should we prepare the young people to enter into the labor market, because the situation is right now kind of wavering?
Work down.
First, let's downside up.
Oh, from
this one, yeah.
Is uncertainty now inevitable? Well, it seems to be growing. I mean, we kind of know from these longitudinal studies that certainty is generally associated with better outcomes, because I guess it suggests to us that young people have given some thought to where they want to go, who they want to be, how they can imagine their identity changing, the sort of identity they aspire to connect with. I think we know that there is the world that we're going to is not completely uncertain. We know that there will be probably kind of police officers and teachers and politicians, and there are sort of like some trades which are very difficult to automate. Cutting hair is difficult to automate. So sort of like certainty. I think I kind of go back to one of the phrases which was just used about sort of like we want young people to think critically. And so sometimes, uncertainty and certainty can be good and bad things, but it's what they tell us about the state of thinking of a young person. Is it that they have very narrow understandings of the labour market? They want to do just what their parents do. That's the only thing they're thinking about, or they're focusing on a goal which is just going to be impossible for them. Or and if they are uncertain, are they taking good decisions to create for themselves a number of different opportunities? They're not ruling things out. They're not dropping subjects which they may need later on. And so certainly there is an argument that in this uncertain world we should just give young people as much human capital as possible, get them all to go to university, get them all to get master's degrees and so on. But we do know that many young people who go to university don't end up with good jobs. And they end up disappointed. So, and it's not for everybody, and the decision needs to be right for the individual. I think that's the point. Should I talk about motivation?
Suur tänu. Järgmine küsimus siis väga konkreetne.
The next question is very concrete. 5 practical advice is for the counseling in order to eliminate as much as possible the insecurity.
And that question, so for 5 practical pieces of advice. Well, that's a challenge for me, isn't it? How long have you got? What do I think is particularly important? I think this point about authenticity is really important. For thinking about what sort of things we want to engage young people in. I think sometimes it's easier to point them towards printed information or online resources. But I think there's something really important about that experience. And if you talk to young people, they often really enjoy the experiences which they have opportunity to take place, which is important. But we really need to listen to them about what they get out of their interactions and what they get out of the sessions which they do. And I think we kind of want them to be reflective, we want them to be critical, we want to be thoughtful about the experience which they have in life. So if you're looking for kind of 5 practical pieces of advice, I would start there. I would start actually connect to this other age about starting young. Because I do think this point, I think, it may be familiar to you, but I think for a lot of people who maybe work in government, sometimes it's not familiar. That career guidance needs to be as much about understanding and working with your understanding of people's expectations and the assumptions which guide their thinking, as much as simply providing them with information. And that way, starting young is really important. And starting at primary school, it could be, really very young at age, being able to, and there's a program, I know programs around the world, which try and bring people from work into primary schools. And the ambition is not to say to the primary school children at 5 or 7 or 10, what do you want to do? But what type of ICT professional, what type of startup do you want? It's far too early for that. But what you can do is help them to understand the relationship between what they're studying and a future economic life, a future adult life. And I see it with my daughter. My daughter wants to be a dancer, And I edited a book recently, and we had a chapter about, sort of dancers. And I kind of know that most dancers are self-employed from the chapter of the book, which I edited. I know that most of them do their own accounts. And so most of them need to have some pretty, basic maths. They have to manage their own careers. And, I tell my daughter that. She doesn't really listen to me. But she would listen to a dancer. She would listen to a dancer, and you need to market yourself and these sorts of things. And so it's new information which allows young people to be able to understand, why it is that we're studying things. Not everybody at school, will always do their very best because, just to please the teacher. It's that extrinsic motivation which is important. And so from a young age, it's about bringing learning to life, which I think is really important. And it's about, those first-hand experiences are very important. But again, giving the young people, introducing them to the idea that they should reflect on, who they are, and who they may become. I think giving those choices is very important.
No suur tänu, nüüd ta vastas nagu nägite esimesele küsimusele, et valige, millisele ta nüüd siis sooviks.
The first question has been answered at the moment, but the next question is how to motivate and how to motivate the employers to also to contribute to the guidance.
I think with employers, the single most important thing that you can do is make it easy for them. In my experience, the one thing which decides whether an employer will work with a careers counsellor or with a school, the one thing which makes the difference is that somebody has to ask them. And so it needs to be easy for them to kind of say yes. It needs to be clear what the ask is. It needs, you need to minimize any need for training. We need to minimize any bureaucracy or administration which might get in the way. And if you think about the authenticity, we really need to, to make sure that they just are themselves and they talk about themselves and they give them experiences which are as true and real as possible. And so, how can we do this? How can we motivate employers? Well, employers, tend to be sort of like, there is an altruism amongst employers and people who work for employers, because if asked, if a friend asked, if a neighbour's child asked, they would say yes, wouldn't they? So like if a friend of a friend does this, and that's a form of social capital. You have people who've got information which you need, and that's a resource. And we can see there's economic value which comes from that resource ultimately. And so what we as people who work in the public sector, what we need to do is be able to be conduits. To be channels through which we can harness people's willingness to share what they know, and we need to be able to channel that through our public institution, through our schools, to make sure that there's kind of democratic access to this information, because in society it's not equally sort of distributed. And so for employers, we are saying, we ask them, through the people they already listen to. So we ask them through their business associations, their professional associations. We ask them through trade unions, and then we make it very easy for them to identify themselves and what they can contribute. National websites are very good in here because you can, and then what you need to be able to do is be able to allow schools. And you've got lots of autonomous schools here in Estonia, to allow the autonomous schools to connect very efficiently and quickly with with employers, and that's important as well, because there's nobody who's better placed to be able to understand what a young person needs than you people and their teachers. And so efficient systems will have a system of making it very quick and easy to be able to connect the two sides. Effective systems will make sure that that you want to get the right person in the right place, in front of the right kid, doing the right activity. And that comes from intermediaries, teachers, career professionals, being able to do that. And if you have national systems which enable that sort of connection to take place, and there are some which do exist, then that works very well. And finally, if you want a system to be kind of equitable and fair, and we want it, and in that case, if we know that there are parts of the world of work which aren't amplifying, aren't signalling well, to young people, then they need to give a bit of a push. And that government can help that by just having somebody to all the machinery. But we also kind of need to make sure if there are parts of the country which may be very rural, or there might be language challenges, we kind of make sure that we have that, we keep an oversight and intervene to make sure that they have that balance of opportunity. So I think for employers, we make it easy. We really do make it easy, and I think that's the key thing.
Suur tänu, applaus.
Thank you.
Oli väga hästi dialoogis sellega, mida nüüd Antonimann rääkis, just sellest varasest õppimisest. Sest tõesti, siin oli ka, et kaasame juba lasteaiad ja kõik, sest hoiakute ja selliste avatud muutustega valmisoleku õppimiseks pole kunagi liiga vara. Muidugi selleks, et nüüd kirjeldada olulisemalt tööhõive probleeme, võib-olla on lasteaias tõesti vara, et see sõltub konkreetsest teemast. Ja siin just see noore pädevus enda arengut juhtida, et kui need noored saavad siis kunagi tööandjateks, on ju lihtsam kaasata neid ka jälle karjääriteenuste tutvustamisse. Päris elu tõesti, nagu ettekannetest välja tuli, inimesed lähevad teada, kuidas need asjad päriselt on, proovida selles keskkonnas, liigutada infot siis nendes keskkondades, kus noored liiguvad. Ja muidugi see tõesti, nagu oli see tütre näide, et kui inimene õpib midagi ja ta õpib selleks, et matemaatikaõpetajale meeldides, on hoopis teine motivatsioon kui see, et mina kui tulevane loovisik pean tegema oma raamatupidamist, või siis mina kui tulevane loovisik õpin delegeerimist, kuidas leida usaldusväärne raamatupidaja, sest et kui me ikka üldse arvutada ei oska, on see suhteliselt riskantne. Et iga aineõpetaja võiks ju olla see, kes siis tõesti selgitab, miks me saame...
Every subject picture could be why we have to write compositions about the... Sorry, I changed the channel. And so let's see what is next. And here again, we could say if people are so the society will win here. Nobody has to go after the doctor PhD level, go back to their vocational school in order to learn something tangible. So table number 9 is accepted. It's not important to be successful so much as to be happy. So it could be something that people have to be happy doing what they're doing, and we have to support the open world. And then there are also teenagers or young people who are learning or combining their learning levels with Finnish vocational or higher education. I hope that Christy will speak about it and elaborate on it. So the labour market environment has changed. How many of you are still on your first chosen profession? Not a single one, so this is quite typical. When I started as a hobby trainer, and I'm also very far from there as well. So most probably some of dentists or hairdressers would keep for a longer time, but becoming instructor maybe on the chosen field later. What else could be? So putting the puzzle together, and who wants to see the big picture. So this is the audience here. Everybody is used to see their own narrower sphere of activity, but to expand it, to enlarge it, and also the class teacher or the counselor's role to see a wider picture. And so it's definitely the counseling should be a very positive, not to select out that, oh, you do not know math, you are a failure in math or the Estonian language, and don't try that. So next keyword is the mega trends, how the robots would become more important in our world. Do you remember when you had to order for the long distance call from the post office, or when you could not imagine that you get the money from the hole in the wall? What else? Experience and volume of information. Definitely we have collected a lot of very good ideas. So the questions or the comments or the results from the table discussions will overlap here. That's quite natural. How early, starting from KG, so self-discovery, and also the choice of ideas, and whether it be a combat pilot or president or and librarian, and playing with dolls or plasticines, and to comprehend the coordinated activities over there, and those who have been left aside or dropouts or have left school, what to do with them. And again, family influence, and also different functions, mini lectures, web articles, and so on, or are the access ways to include the co-workers and focused preparation, and then teamwork, parents, youth workers, teachers, also empowering their personalities, and also so this is also using lubricants over there. It's also the smoothen out would be easier explanation. And then also scientific research-based results. So quite a number of professions would disappear, and then referring back to the tables over there, that the kind of aspiration goes or is varying between 10 main professions over there, and how many those would be left in 10 years' time, say, or something. Also differences in generations. For example, in our average student in our institute level, what do you think, how old? 32, and also 70 years of age. So this is changing very rapidly as well, the age level. And again, grandmother's advice, yes, sometimes it's useful. My grandmother always say that, become a dentist. This is needed all the way through. But definitely if children are self-directed and self-managed individuals, they will choose themselves. And then 12th table, that there's over-management for the children. So come here, no answer, and the right answer is over there. And now go to the independent life and start making decisions from your own wit. But this is a skill that should be exercised and repeated from the early age on. But in school level, it's very often now a majority. How many of you come from school, teaching in schools? Quite a number, that this is a workbook-related activities. Page this and do this, and whatever we learn, it's the overall aim is to provide skills for coping in individual life and independent life. So that could be that the system direction or trend should be guided into the more flexible direction. So no need to be afraid of digital channels, and the services have to be designed in Estonia so that all the users could select the suitable. And this is the task of the government, and so that the career counsellors would be competent. So quite a number of concrete things that could be implemented or are worth thinking through. But now it's lunchtime, and we will resume at 2 o'clock. Thank you.